Good evening and welcome to Primetime News. I'm Sandro Ferdinando. Let's take a look at your headlines for tonight.
Double centuries from Nishan Madhushka and Kusal Mendis and centuries from Angelo Matthews and Dimuth Karunaratne helped Sri Lanka rack up huge total against Ireland.
Yes, it will. Kusal Mendis, but this time make sure.
Sri Lanka's economy shrank by 7.8% last year, reveals the CBSL annual report. Multiple factions call for renegotiation with IMF with regard to domestic debt restructuring.
කාටද සහතිකයක් දෙන්න පුළුවන් වන්නේ මේකෙන් අහිතකර බලපෑමක් ඇතිවන්නේ නැහැ කියලා සේවක අර්ථ සාධක අරමුදලට සේවක බාරකාර අරමුදලට
ඉතාමත් නික්මනින් IMF එකත් එක්ක මේ සියල්ලක්ම රීනෙගෝෂিয়েට් කරන්න.
Sarath Fonseca responds to Vimal Veeravansa's regime change allegation.
ඔය කැවුටුවන්සේ ආපහු හදන්න ගොඩ ගහලා මේ පැත්තට පැනලා ඇමතිකමක් ගන්න තමයි උදා කරන්නේ.
Do not table the anti-terror bill in its current form. Human Rights Commission writes to the President.
Sri Lanka made their 7th test total of 700 or more on day 4 against Ireland, declaring on 704 for 3 after taking a 212-run lead in the test match. Double centuries from Nishan Madhushka and Kusal Mendis, followed by a 15th test 100 for Angelo Matthews, saw Sri Lanka take a big lead against Ireland in goal on day 4.
Resuming on 357 for the loss of 1 after reinforced early stumps on day 3, Nishan Madhushka and Kusal Mendis piled on Ireland's misery, putting on a 268-run partnership. Madhushka converted his maiden test ton into a double, while Mendis made his first double 102 later in the day. The breakthrough for Ireland came right before the second new ball was taken, when Andy McBride had Madhushka tapped in front for 205. His innings included 22 boundaries and 1 6.
Right. That should be it. That should be it. Kabau. A double 100. His maiden 100. He's converted it into a double 100. It's a massive moment.
Mendis and Matthews joined hands from there on, carrying Sri Lanka through till the total was on 629 when Mendis was out, caught by Humphreys of Graham Hume's bowling.
Yes, it will. Kusal Mendis. First time he's gone past 200. He's threatened on a few occasions, but this time make sure.
Mendis was dismissed for 245 runs, which included 11 sixes and 18 boundaries. He entered the record books by smashing the highest number of sixes by a Sri Lankan batsman in a test innings. Dinesh Chandimal retired hurt on 13 runs. Sri Lanka Cricket said he was taken to hospital for an X-ray. Matthew's stun later in the day meant that each of Sri Lanka's top 4 had made 100 in the innings, only the third such instance in test history. With Madhushka and Mendis' double ton and centuries from Karunaratne and Matthews, Sri Lanka became the third team to achieve this rare test feat. Matthews scored his 15th test century, which included 6 boundaries and 4 sixes. Sri Lanka declared their first innings for 704 runs for the loss of 3 wickets and were leading by 212 runs. Ireland's second innings was piloted by James McCullum and Peter Moore. James fell for 10 runs off a Ramesh Mendis delivery, and Moore fell for 19 off a Prabhat Jayasuriya delivery. Ireland were 54 runs for the loss of 2 wickets at stumps.
They're all screaming for this.
The Central Bank of Sri Lanka says that the economic growth in Sri Lanka for 2022 was a negative 7.8%. The Central Bank of Sri Lanka's annual report released on Thursday states that this year's economic growth will also be a negative 2%.
The annual report of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka 2022 was presented by the Central Bank Governor Dr. Nandalal Veerasinghe to Minister of Finance, President Ranil Wickremesinghe, at the premises of the Ministry of Finance. It notes that 2022 was the most difficult period in post-independent Sri Lanka. The central bank report states that Sri Lanka, which has been facing budget and balance of payments deficit for a long time, reached a position where it was not possible to face the challenges arising from domestic and foreign sources by 2022. It noted that the economy suffered a massive shock due to reasons such as tax reduction, resorting to organic agriculture without any prior preparation, attempting to service foreign debts until foreign reserves were depleted, as well as not paying attention to early warnings. The central bank says that due to this, the foreign currency crisis turned the socio-economic problem into a socio-political problem, resulting in the collapse of business confidence, the shortage of essential materials, and the rapid rise in the cost of living and production. In the last year, fuel prices have increased by 185%, bus fares by 140%, water tariffs by 120%, and electricity tariff by 114%. The central bank report shows that in terms of food, the price of bread increased by 166%, milk powder by 150%, and fruits by 112% during the same year. With the increase in prices of goods and services, the purchasing power of the private sector employees decreased by 22.7%, and the purchasing power of the public sector employees decreased by 20.6%.
When the economy of Sri Lanka was in dire strait last year, an agreement for an extended fund facility was entered into with the IMF as a measure of last resort. Sri Lanka has received the first tranche under the facility and is now looking at meeting the benchmark set by the IMF. The government is attempting to restructure both international and domestic debt, and debates on these matters were held in Parliament today.
The guidelines on restructuring foreign and local debt has not been finalized yet. The government will issue a statement on the matter as soon as a final decision on the procedure to restructure the entire debt is reached.
What
did the governor of the central bank, the president and the state minister of finance tell us over and over again? They said that they will not touch domestic debt. They deceived the country, deceived parliament, and are now starting local debt restructuring. Using the mandate that he got, Gotabaya Rajapaksa withdrew from the IMF program in 2020 and even returned a sum of $100 million. The government has come to a point where they are contradicting everything that they said and did. It was right to go to the IMF, but the deal that was finalized after negotiations is wrong. Look at these IMF policies immediately and prepare to renegotiate with the IMF.
There
is a risk of the local banking system collapsing completely. The president says that if the banks are collapsing, that is all right, there is nothing that can be done. He said that if the stock market crashes, he will shut it down. As a result of those statements, the stock market that was on the rise had collapsed today. Who can give an assurance that this will not affect the EPF and ETF? We have taken a clear decision. We will be voting against this tomorrow evening. Multilateral institutions like the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank will not restructure our debt. Several powerful countries are saying that they will not restructure our debt if these institutions do not restructure their debt. We cannot enter into an agreement internationally without resolving these issues first. There are 3 techniques to restructure debt. We can change interest rates. We can change the maturity period. We can take a haircut. If the people and this parliament are not properly informed of this process and it is not carried out smoothly, the crisis that we experienced last year in the power sector and the energy sector, the lines that we witnessed at the petrol sheds may be seen at ATMs and banks.
Field Marshal Sarath Fonseca and MP Vimal Weerawansa verbally sparred in Parliament during the IMF debate.
කැහුටුවන්සට මං කියන්න ඕනේ පොත් ලියලිය හමුදාපතිවරුන්ට මඩ ගහන්න එපා මටත් මඩ ගහලා තියෙනවා ඔය පුද්ගලයා අපි හමුදාපති පුටුවල ඉන්නකොට අපේ සේප්පුලව කෑවා ශෛන්ද සිල්ලගේ පස්සෙන් ගියා.
Do not sling mud at the army commander by writing books. You have done the same to me When I was the army commander, you came to me. You went after Shavendra Silva as well. This person has penned a book and claimed that we tried to conspire and topple the government. He claims that Shavendra Silva and I orchestrated it. He is trying to cross over for a ministerial position, and that is why he is doing this. I recall the time when I was the army commander, how he used to call me. When I asked him what's the issue, he said he would call me back or speak later. This is how he was, and now he is slinging mud at us. This is disgraceful. The people should be careful when voting for people like this.
මේ වගේ මිනිස්සුන්ට නැවතත් රට බාරනවා දෙන්න මේ රටේ ජනතාව පරිස්සම් වෙන්න ඕනේ. සරත් ෆොන්සේකා උන්නේ මෙතන රටමල ගියා කියලා මට ආරංචි වුණා. අප්‍රේල් 9 මැයි 9 ජූන්.
I heard that Sarath Fonseca made some comments. I published a book on the American game that was played on the 9th of July. It was titled 9 The Hidden Story. One of the characters in that book spoke and left. Only he got the opportunity to speak there and no one else. Sajith Premadasa, Anuruddha Dissanayaka had to turn back. Only he got the chance to speak. It hurts when the truth is spoken. He is the one who controlled Shavendra Silva at that time. I did not mention the name in the book. Shavendra Silva and Sarath Fonseca were controlled by the US ambassador. Ambassador Julie had tweeted that an MP had published a book with lies without even mentioning my name. It means that she had translated the book in a day and read it. I stopped an attempt being made to convert the country into a Libya. This is why we exposed. The program to solely depend on the IMF treatment will not bear fruit.
කරන්න ගහපු මැච් එකක් තමයි අපි මේ හෙළිදරව් කරන්නේ. ඒ නිසා අපි ඉතා ඕනකමින් කියනවා මුල්‍ය අරමුදලේ ට්‍රීට්මන්ට් එක, මුල්‍ය අරමුදලේ ප්‍රතිකර්මය මත පමණක් රැඳෙමින් ඒක මත පමණක් බලාපොරොත්තු තබා ගනිමින් මේ යන ක්‍රියාන්විතය කිසිසේත්ම පළ දරන්නේ නැහැ.
මේ දැන් කෑ ගහන ඔස්තාද්ලම තමයි.
Those who are yelling out now are the ones who misled Gotabaya Rajapaksa and said no to the IMF, and everything can be done according to the local way. There should be no vote because this has no legal power. The cabinet made agreement has been signed. This is put in place to ruin you all. Let's see if Namal and Mahinda will be here for the vote.
මේ ජනාධිපතිතුමා ඔබතුමන්ලාටත් කෙලවන්න තමයි මේක දාලා තියෙන්නේ. දැන් බලමුකෝ හෙට නාමල් කුමාරයයි මහින්ද මහත්තයා එනවද කියලා ඡන්ද දෙන්න මේකට.
Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna parliamentarian S.M. Chandrasena said that a group of doctors misled former President Gotabaya Rajapaksa.
Gotabaya Rajapaksa ජනාධිපතිතුමා වරදී උපදෙස් දුන්නා මේ රටේ ඉන්න.
There were a group of doctors who gave the wrong advice to President Gotabaya Rajapaksa. They said that the use of chemical fertilizer is the cause for hundreds of thousands to be diagnosed with cancer and their deaths. They also said that if we switch to organic fertilizer completely, it would save the health ministry and the treasury a lot of money. Thereafter, Dr. Padenia and other doctors visited the parliament and delivered lectures to the MPs. They misled former President Gotabaya Rajapaksa. That was the mistake. The issue only grew worse. We accept that it was wrong. He did not want to listen to us. Once when I wanted to speak about the fertilizer issue, he said I would be sacked. There's nothing to speak after that.
තවත් පොහොර ගැන කතා කරන්න ගියොත් ඇමතිගේ මුත්තාස් කරනවා කිව්වා. ඉතින් අයිට එහෙම කතා කරන්න දෙයක් නැහැ නේ.
ජනාධිපතිවරණයකදී පොදු අපේක්ෂකයා විදියට රනිල් වික්‍රමසිංහ මැතිතුමාව යෝජනා කරන්න ඔබතුමාගේ පක්ෂයෙන් යෝජනා කරනවා.
නෑ නෑ අපේ මැති ඇමතිවරු
MPs are making private proposals for Ranil Wickremesinghe to be made the presidential candidate. Party will reach a decision. Just as we supported him to become the president, party will support him in that as well. That will be decided at the election.
ඡන්දයක් එන වෙලාවට අපි තීන්දුව කරනවා.
Did Sri Lanka police use expired tear gas to disperse protests in the recent months? This was an issue raised at the Committee on Public Accounts that met Wednesday evening.
Sri Lanka's Chief of Police, C.D. Vikramaratne, was summoned to the Committee on Public Accounts on Wednesday evening, and he was accompanied by several top ranks of Sri Lanka Police. Page 12 makes it clear that there are shortcomings at the Sri Lanka Police Central Armory and regarding the use and storage of expired tear gas. Does this mean that you deployed expired goods?
According to the inventory, a certain number of tear gas shells were expired. That number remains in the police central armory. We will be disposing of these expired shells and grenades within the next month. It is reported that several expired gas shells remain with the Keselwatta and Narahimbita police stations. That is accurate, and those shells were not used. These were imported in 2012, and 5 years since then is considered as the expiry period. Another batch was imported in 2017. The expired tear gas shells and grenades with the Keselwatta and Narahimbita police stations have been handed over to the police central armory. Expired goods will not remain at police stations. Expired goods are not used and they are replaced with new products. The 2020 imports have already been issued to the police stations.
It means that excess tear gas was ordered. Is there any protocol that is followed to store such a large amount? Are there any international regulations?
International regulations
These are provisions in the Criminal Code of Procedure for the use of reasonable force. In addition, there are provisions in the police ordinance as well. In addition, the IGP has requested the Human Rights Commission to prepare a set of guidelines. We are yet to receive them. We also use them as per the directives given by the Attorney General from time to time. The expiry of tear gas means that there is a drop in effectiveness. That is why we see some officers holding on to the cans. This report was prepared based on the information provided by you. It does not justify his argument to claim that expiry is not the issue. Though the power reduces when it expires, the chemical components can pose a threat.
According to a statement issued by the US Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, former Sri Lanka Naval Commander Wasantha Karannagoda, who is currently the governor of Northwestern Province in Sri Lanka, has been banned entry to the United States.
Former Sri Lankan Naval Commander Wasantha Karannagoda, along with his wife Srimati Asoka Karannagoda, have been banned entry to the United States due to his involvement in a gross violation of human rights during his tenure as a naval commander. The statement further notes that, quote, the allegation that Wasantha Karannagoda committed gross human rights violations documented by NGOs and independent investigations is serious and credible, unquote. He added, quote, by designating Wasantha Karannagoda, the United States reaffirms its commitment to upholding human rights, ending impunity for human rights violators, acknowledging the suffering of victims and survivors, and promoting accountability for perpetrators in Sri Lanka, unquote.
The Foreign Ministry said that Sri Lanka regrets the decision by the US to designate Admiral of the Fleet Wasantha Karannagoda, the present governor of the Northwestern Province, on the 26th of April 2023. Foreign Minister Ali Sabri expressed Sri Lanka's grave concerns associated with this decision to the US Ambassador Julie Chung on the 27th of April 2023. The Foreign Ministry statement noted that as a long-standing bilateral partner of Sri Lanka, such unilateral action by the US without following due process is counterproductive to the holistic approach that Sri Lanka has taken on addressing national unity and reconciliation. It added that it is also unfortunate that the announcement emanates against the backdrop of tangible progress made by the government in strengthening the country's democratic governance and reconciliation structures. The Foreign Ministry said that despite these challenges, Sri Lanka will continue in its ongoing efforts to achieve reconciliation, economic recovery and socio-economic development.
Russian ambassador to Sri Lanka commented on the interference on domestic affairs as well as the blacklisting of a former Sri Lankan Navy chief.
Also a few words about relations with the United States, that their main aim is destabilization of the situation in the world. They interfere into domestic affairs of many countries, not only in Russia. Today in the morning, I read this just news that they decided to designate the governor of Northwestern Province, the former commander of Navy, just imposed sanctions against him for so-called violations of human rights. First of all, they should focus on their domestic issues, or their domestic problems. They have a huge number of problems in the United States, in Europe. Look what's going on in France, in Germany. So such an interference into domestic affairs of sovereign countries, including Sri Lanka, are totally unacceptable. Nobody has a right to lecture you what to do or not to do. This is your domestic issue. And I think that the government of Sri Lanka, your political parties, both opposition, ruling parties, the people, everybody, all political forces, you are wise enough to settle down your problems yourselves. Once again, for Western countries, better to focus on their domestic problems, not to lecture others.
The Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka requested the President not to table the anti-terrorism bill in its current form until a national dialogue is concluded and its recommendations are published along with a clear plan.
The Human Rights Commission in a letter to the President said that in order to address the anti-terrorism bill, it is imperative to further explore the much-needed delayed peace and reconciliation process. It added that this peace and reconciliation process would not only be for the communities in the north and east who suffered directly under the ravages of 30-plus years of horrific civil war. The Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka said this process would also be for those communities affected by the uprising in South in the 70s and 80s, where many remain greatly affected by both the uprising and the state's response. The HRCSL is of the firm view that establishing a national dialogue that equally addresses the peace and reconciliation process will better define the contextual necessity for a bill comparable to the proposed anti-terrorism bill, and more importantly, it would show the government's commitment to ensure and building further peace and harmony amongst the nation's citizenry.
Former Commissioner of the Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka, Ambiga Sakuntanathan, said that anti-terrorism bill will bring the military to do the policing.
When our constitutionally protected rights are undermined, it actually makes us more insecure. Giving more power to the police or the military actually does not make us more secure. It makes us insecure. They have brought part of the ICCPR Act under the anti-terrorism bill. They have said in the anti-terrorism bill that propagating war or advocating national, racial or religious hatred that constitutes incitement to discrimination, hostility or violence, if you do that with one of the offences, then it constitutes terrorism. But what they're doing through the anti-terrorism bill is they're bringing the military in to do policing. Because this law will give the military power to arrest someone. After arresting someone, they can keep the person in custody for 24 hours. That is a very long time. The law doesn't say you have to arrest and immediately give the person to the police. No, 24 hours. Because in a democracy, the role of the military is to safeguard the external borders.
More news will come your way after this commercial break. Stay tuned.
අපේ රහට නියම කහට.
Chinese ambassador to Sri Lanka, Kee Zhen-yon, visited Kandy.
China's ambassador to Sri Lanka, Kee Zhen-hong, visited the Mahanayaka Thero of the Asgiriya chapter of the Siam sect, the most venerable Varakagoda Sri Gnanaratna Thero at the Asgiri Mahavihara. Thereafter, he visited the Malvattu Mahavihara and met with the Mahanayaka of the Malvattu chapter, the most venerable Tibbatuabe Sri Siddhartha Sumangala Thero, and informed about the establishment of filling stations and a refinery.
And now the Sri Lanka is gradually resume normals. The urgency for Sri Lanka government how to attract international investors to come to Sri Lanka. So recently, the China merchant invest South Asia commercial and logistic center that will set a strong signal to the international to the whole world. Yeah, so this is a big event. Maybe all of you can notice that.
Dr. Nalaka Godaheva responded to the criticism levelled by Minister Vijaydas Rajapaksa with regard to the MT New Diamond and MV Express Pearl maritime incidents. Dr. Godaheva stressed that he never instructed to allow the MT New Diamond to exit the sea of Sri Lanka.
I spoke to former President Gotabaya Rajapaksa yesterday at around 11:50 am. I inquired about it from him. He told me that even I was against releasing that vessel. He said that he told the Foreign Secretary and the chairman of the MIPA to follow the directives of the Attorney General. Then I spoke to then Foreign Secretary Jayantha Kolambage. He was overseas and I spoke to him around 12:21 in the afternoon. He said that I never spoke to the Foreign Secretary on this matter. He also told me that the vessel was carrying 270,000 metric tons of crude oil. If a leak occurred, we would not be able to bring down tourists fisheries for the next 2 decades. This is why officials decided to allow the vessel to leave Sri Lankan waters. The Express Pearl sank in June 2020. There is an issue with regard to the delay on the part of the Attorney General's Department to secure compensation for the damages caused by the Express Pearl disaster. Did anyone delay filing this case? Minister Vijayadasa Rajapaksa made a controversial statement recently, alleging that someone took a bribe. If a bribe is taken, that should be either to influence the Attorney General's Department or to delay the case from being filed. So who can do that? A person linked to the Attorney General's Department. It is common for a pickpocketer to yell thief after stealing something and run along with the crowd. The crowd also starts to chase after another person. This appears to be something like that. Back then, some called Ranil Wickremesinghe the Don Juan Dharmapala and alleged that the UNP cabinet minister were linked to the Easter Sunday attacks. Though they can be seated together, we cannot do that.
අපි හෘද සාක්ෂියට එකඟව වැඩ කරන අය. නීතිපති දෙපාර්තමේන්තුව අපහසුතාවයට පත් කරන්න හැදුවා. මේ ප්ලීස් මම කතා කරන්න ඉවරනකන් ඉන්න. බොහොමට කියනට ඉදින්න බෑ. මොකද ඔච්චර බය වෙලා දඟලන්නේ. වැරද්දක් නෑ.
What are you afraid of if you have not done anything wrong? When questions were raised over the reasons for allowing the vessel to leave, the MIPA chairman said that it was an order from the president. I asked her how she got the order. She has an email with her penned by Jayanth Kolambage addressed to the commander of the Navy and the MIPA chairman. The president would never issue an order to the commander of the Navy through the foreign secretary. It has never happened before, and that is why I asked it from the former president. He made it clear that if an order is to be given to the commander of the Navy, it should go through the defense secretary. You were the subject minister at that time. You had the power to detain the vessel, secure compensation and then allow it to leave. Former Attorney General Dappula de Oliveira had given a directive not to allow this vessel to exit until the compensation is paid. Despite that, the vessel was allowed to leave.
වගකීම තිබුණේ ඔබතුමාට තමයි මේ නැව යන්න නොදී වන්දි මුදල අරගෙන ඉවර වෙලා නැවට යන්න අවසර දීමේ කටයුත්ත කරන්න බලය තිබුණේ ඔබතුමාට. හිටපු නීතිපති දප්පුල දෙලිවේරා මැතිතුමා නියෝගයක් දීලා තියෙනවා මේ නැවට යන්න දෙන්න එපා වන්දි තැන්පත් කරනකම් කියලා. එහෙම තියෙද්දි තමයි මේ නැව මුදා හැරියේ කිසිම තරක.
Is there anything to claim that the Coastal Conservation Secretary issued an order? If so, please table it in Parliament. Please do not drag my name into this.
මේකට පටලන්න එපා මෙතුමාගේ කතාවේදී කිව්වා.
He referred to the Easter Sunday attacks and former cabinet ministers, and because there are those who support it, he would be seated in the opposition. There is no allegation against President Ranil Wickremesinghe with regard to the Easter Sunday attacks. None of the cabinet ministers at that time are not present in this cabinet. You looted the marine resources and destroyed the fishing communities.
තමාන කැබිනට් එක තුල නෑ. තමුන්නාංශ තමයි හිටපු ජනාධිපතිට උපදෙස් දීලා තමුන්නාංශ තමයි මුදත් මංකොල්ල කාලා නැවත් මංකොල්ල කාලා පරිසරයත් මංකොල්ල කාලා ජීවරංග ජීවන සම්පතක් නැති
මන්තුමාත් එක්ක කතාව කරන්න කරුණා කරලා ඔබතුමාලා දෙන්නම ඉඳගන්න සභාවේ ගෞරවය රැකගෙන නිමල්ලංශ මන්තුමා ඔබතුමා කරුණා කරලා ඉඳගන්න ඔබතුමා කරුණා කරලා ඉඳගන්න
මේක බාරව හිටපු ඇමතිතුමා නාලක ගොඩහේවා කියන්නේ.
Nalaka Godeheva is a former subject minister. How can he slither away from this? You were also involved in the 15 million rupee Krish deal with Namal Rajapaksa. You were the chairman of the stock exchange as well. Do not forget your past. It was a person called Amarasekara who sponsored your UK visit. I can provide the details. It was Amarasekara who took you to the UK, organized meetings during the presidential election and took you everywhere to have a good time and collect funds. Do not try to point the finger at us. If you can, deny that.
එහෙ ගෙනහිල්ලා ඔය හැමතැනම පෙන්නලා විනෝද වෙලා මුදල් එකතු කරලා දුන්නෙත් ඔබතුමාට ඒ අමරසේකර කෙනෙක්ම තමයි. ඒ හින්දා ඔබතුමා මෙතන දන්නේ බබා වගේ අනිත් අයට ඇඟිලි දික් කර කර මේවා කරන්න කතා කියන්න ලෑස්ති වෙන්න එපා. දැන් දන්නේ නැහැ කියන්න.
The Auditor General of Sri Lanka has stated that he does not approve the financial statements of the Land Reform Commission. The Auditor General made the announcement when the LRC was summoned to the Committee on Public Enterprises on Wednesday.
In the financial statement ending 31st December 2022, 676 million rupees has been added, and when you divide it, a purge comes from 975 rupees. I cannot approve these accounts. I have standards and I am bound by the law. The values in these financial statements are inaccurate. 22 acres were given to Mrs. Shamin Kirialla from Hantana. That property was sold. Can she own the land?
මේ ප්‍රශ්නයට මූලික වෙලා තියෙන රාසගලවත්ත කියලා රත්නපුර දිස්ත්‍රික්කයේ පිහිටි ඉඩමක්.
මේ කියන තැනැත්තියට හිමිකම් තියෙනවද දෙන්න ඉඩමක් ඔබතුමාලට එච්චරයි.
එතුමිය කොමිෂන් සභාවේ ප්‍රකාශකයෙක් නෙමෙයි. කර 50ට අඩු ඉඩම් හිමියෙක්.
එතකොට එතුමිය හිමිකම් ප්‍රකාශකයෙක් නෙවෙයි නම් ඒ වෙනුවට එතුමියට කොහොමද අක්කර 22ක් ඉඩමක් දෙන්නේ?
එතුමියට මුල් අයිති තිබ්බ රාසගලවත්තේ එතුමියගේ ප්‍රමාණය LRCකට ඇවිල්ලත් නැහැ. එතකොට LRCකට වගකීමක් නැහැ. එයාට විකල්ප ඉඩමක් දෙන්න.
දැන් එතුමියට හිමිකම් නැහැ ඉඩමක් ගන්න. හැබැයි එතුමිය ඉඩමක් අරගෙන තියෙනවා.
මාසයක් ඇතුළත අපි ඔබතුමා කැඳවනවා. මේ රිපෝට් එක ඉවර කරා.
22 acres from Hantana was sold in 2020 for 101,109 rupees, an acre for 4,595, where a perch is sold for 28 rupees and 72 cents. Homelands has sold a perch for 600,000 rupees. Their revenue will be over 2 billion. The LRC gets only 101,109 rupees. The deed is for Homelands. Can a perch be purchased for 2 rupees in Hantana?
ඔප්පුව ලියලා තියෙන හෝම්ලෑන්ඩ් එකට. රුපියල් 2.46කට හන්තානේ ගන්න පුළුවන්ද පර්චේස් එක?
දෙල්ගොල්ලගේ අගෝනිස් විල්සන් නෑනට තමයි ඔප්පුව LRC එකෙන් නිකුත් කරලා තියෙන්නේ. බාහිර පාර්ශ්වයකට බැහැර කිරීමේ හැකියාවක් නැහැ.
නෑ වර්තමාන තක්සේරුවක් ගන්න නැද්ද දෙනකොට?
භූමාරුවට විකල්ප ඉඩම් ලබා දීමේදී
නෑ ඒක ඔප්පුව රෙජිස්ටර් කරන්න කොහොමද?
කෑගල්ල ඉඩමක් වෙනුවට නුවර ඉඩමක් දෙනවා නම් කෑගල්ල ඉඩමෙත් ඒ 81 වර්ෂයේ තක්සේරුව කැඳවනවා. ඒ අදාළ දෙන ඉඩමෙත් නුවර දෙනවා. නුවර ඉඩමෙත් ඒ වර්ෂයට අදාළ තක්සේරුව කැඳවනවා.
ඔබතුමා හිතනවාද 81 හන්තානේ වත්තේ රුපියල් 24කට පර්චේස් එකක් ගන්න පුළුවන් කියලා? හන්තානේ කියන්නේ මහනුවර තියෙන වටිනාම ඉඩම් තියෙන තැන.
Meanwhile, President Ranil Wickremesinghe emphasized that the government is committed to carrying out its agricultural modernization plan.
The government is going ahead with a agriculture modernization plan. But before we get into that, we had certain issues to be sorted out. One was the Mahavali Authority and the Mahavali lands, which is now being resolved. And secondly is the regional plantation companies. Now, one is the regional plantation, the leases are expiring. I think the next 10 or 15 years the leases will expire. If you are going in for agricultural modernization, we'll have to give new leases. Some have done well, others haven't. We did I think a survey in 2018, so I thought we'll update that. And then see how they have performed and look at the basis on which we will give land. So that is the major issue that we have to discuss. And the concern that once you give it to a company, they should not sell the shareholdings without the consent of the government. Then the government is looking at the whole issue of gemming on the lands. These really are the issues. Modernizing agriculture is making this into agribusinesses.
MP Shanakian Rasamanikam clashed with Minister Ali Sabri in Parliament over a recent comment that was made.
I would like to ask for an apology from the minister in charge for that degradatory word that he used about my including my parents. I would like an apology, and I would also like the Ethics and Privilege Committee to suspend him from Parliament for a period of 2 weeks at least.
What is this? Cheap electoral politics to divide people, rouse trouble of communalism and win elections. Yes, I appeared for Rajapakshas and for Gotabaya Rajapaksa. I'm very proud of, because they led. They may fail in the last 2-3 years because of the sensitive nature of the economic thing, but they played a heroic role in getting rid of terrorism in this country. I will appear, even tomorrow I will appear for them when I go out of it. I'm not going to be here for long. That's not my livelihood like you. I'm a lawyer. I'll go back and I'll practice again. On that day, if any other more heroes who wants to come, I will appear for them.
Minister, please.
If I have said any unparliamentary language,
yes,
I will apologize.
Right.
I will withdraw that.
Right.
That I did not mean to do that.
That's right.
I love the Tamils, but I don't like communalists.
Thank you very much.
Now I have a draft copy of the Hansard. It's here. And I want to table that.
Honorable Leader.
These donkeys don't understand the meaning of what I'm saying. Total bunch of donkeys.
Yeah.
So I'm happy
it has
that
been
you have
withdrawn
taken
now.
back what
it will
you
be
said.
expunged.
And I'm happy about that.
So
Thank
that
you.
is enough now.
Respect the opposition leader. And
just now he made a unparliamentary word. Sir, the donkey is neither opposition leader is a donkey, and
everything will be expunged. Whoever who used that, it will be expunged.
This is unparliamentary.
Right. Okay.
Honourable Speaker, whilst I raised a privilege issue regarding a degradatory comment that was made by the Honourable Minister, I appreciate the fact that he has apologised and he has withdrawn that statement, so I'd like to thank the Honourable Minister for that.
Up next is Crime Watch.
Crime Watch.
The body of a woman was discovered from behind a house located down Piris Mawatha in the Kaluthara North Police jurisdiction. Police officers had rushed to the scene following a call made by the victim's daughter. It was reported that stab wounds were observed on the neck area of the victim, and Sri Lanka police said that a knife was also located close to the body of the deceased. The woman suspected to have been murdered was identified as 69-year-old W. Premavati, a local Ayurvedic doctor. News First correspondent said that she was a mother of two and her husband passed away several years ago. The deceased woman's daughter, son-in-law and their 3 children were living in the same house. The News First correspondent said that the deceased woman's son was living overseas. The body was moved to the Nagore hospital for the post-mortem examination.
Crime Watch.
The regional conference of the Chartered Accountants of Sri Lanka was held today in Jaffna.
The Jaffna Regional Conference is the first conference organised in Jaffna by the Chartered Accountants of Sri Lanka. The conference saw the attendance of Northern Province Governor Jeevan Tyagaraja, Vice Chancellor of the University of Jaffna, Professor Sri Satgunaraja, Chairman of CA Sri Lanka Sanjay Bandara, and the Vice President of CA Sri Lanka Kesana Kuruppu.
But I think we need to go beyond philanthropy to earn, develop, save and prosper. Now, at the front end of all of this, it would be ideal. I believe Norway has, states of Australia do, Singapore has pension funds. This comment is with the Secretary Treasury to say let's have a pension fund with our revenue, with a percentage of our revenue. Furthermore, call it what you want, development bonds, if it's possible, even for the 100 rupees shareholder. Now, there are certain areas where we are not going to get free money anymore, which is housing, etc., roads, so on and so forth. We can generate revenue and create the development fund, of which, while public sector can spend, citizens could also be partners. It requires an enormous amount of credibility for people to believe that such a fund is something good to touch.
The conference objectives were to exert relevant and required social and economic impact and the involvement of stakeholders with institute activities from across the Jaffna region.
And with that, wrap up news for tonight. Thank you very much for joining us. Do take care and good night.